The world woke up on July 9, 2026, to news that felt impossible. Bonnie Tyler, the woman whose gravel and thunder voice defined a decade and outlived it by 40 years, was gone at 75. But in the days since her passing, a second story has crept in alongside the grief, one about money, property, and a legacy far bigger than anyone assumed. So what did Bonnie Tyler actually leave behind, and why has the number attached to her name left even her closest circle emotional? Let's get into it. Nobody expected this ending, least of all the people who loved her. In May of 2026, Bonnie Tyler was admitted to a hospital near her home in Faro, Portugal, for emergency surgery after doctors discovered a perforated intestine. To help her body recover from the trauma, physicians placed her into a medically induced coma. 4 weeks, fans and colleagues waited anxiously for updates, sharing well wishes across social media and hoping the woman who had survived 5 decades in a brutal industry would pull through this too. In June, there was cautious relief. Her team confirmed she had woken from the coma. But the relief didn't last. She remained, in her representative's own words, very unwell, still fighting in intensive care. Her scheduled summer tour, which was meant to carry her voice across the UK, Malta, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Turkey, and Romania, had to be quietly cancelled. Then, on the night of July 8, everything changed. Her family released a statement confirming that Bonnie Tyler had died unexpectedly in the hospital, a result of complications from the illness she had been fighting for weeks. The tributes arrived almost instantly, and they came from every corner of the entertainment world. Her manager and longtime music executive describe her as one of a kind, someone with an enormous sense of humor, a stunning voice, and a stage presence that never dimmed, even decades after her commercial peak. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's office released a statement calling her one of the greatest recording artists Britain has ever produced. The Welsh Secretary of State honored her as a national music icon. Fellow Welsh star Catherine Zeta-Jones expressed heartbreak at losing a woman she considered a symbol of home. Even Doctor Who showrunner Russell T Davies, a lifelong fan, spoke of loving her voice since he was a teenager. Behind all of it stood her husband, Robert Sullivan, her partner of more than 50 years. The two never had biological children. Tyler experienced a miscarriage in her late 30s after years of putting family plans on hold while her career exploded, but she often said she never felt like she was missing anything. Between 5 godchildren and a sprawling extended family of nieces, nephews, and great-nieces and nephews, she considered herself surrounded by love until the very end. But grief, as it so often does in the entertainment industry, quickly gave way to another question circulating just as fast. What happens now to everything Bonnie Tyler built? To understand why her fortune has become such a point of fascination, you have to go back to where she came from, because almost nothing about her origins predicted where she would end up. She was born Gaynor Hopkins in 1951 in Skewen, a small town near Neath in South Wales, the daughter of a coal miner. She was raised in public housing alongside 5 siblings, in a household so modest that, according to those who knew her family, the home didn't even have an indoor toilet. Sundays meant chapel, sometimes multiple services in a single day, in a strict and disciplined upbringing that left little room for dreams of stardom. She left school at 16 without formal qualifications and took a job behind the counter of a local grocery store. There was no singing lesson, no stage school, no industry connections, just a teenage girl with an unusually powerful voice that nobody outside her small Welsh town had ever heard. Everything changed almost by accident. Encouraged by relatives, a teenage Gaynor entered a local talent competition and came in second place. She didn't win, but something about standing on that stage told her this was where she belonged. For the next several years, she built her craft the hard way, singing night after night in pubs and working men's clubs scattered across South Wales, developing a reputation long before she developed a record deal. That reputation eventually reached the ears of a talent scout who happened to catch her performing a cover of Frida Payne's Band of Gold in a club in Swansea. He knew immediately he was hearing something rare. That chance encounter led to a contract with RCA Records in 1975, and with it, a new name, Bonnie Tyler. Here's the detail almost nobody outside serious music fans knows. The husky, rasping voice that would eventually become one of the most recognizable sounds in pop music wasn't something she was born with, it was the result of surgery. In 1977, Tyler underwent an operation to remove vocal nodules that had developed from years of hard singing. The procedure altered her vocal cords permanently, and instead of a smoother, more conventional voice, she emerged with the raw, husky growl that would define her sound for the rest of her career. In other words, the voice that made her a legend was, in a very real sense, a medical accident that turned into a signature. That same year, her single It's a Heartache cracked the top 5 of the UK charts, and Bonnie Tyler was suddenly, unmistakably, a star. Stardom on that scale is one thing. Immortality is another. And for Bonnie Tyler, immortality arrived through a partnership with a songwriter who thought in operatic, larger-than-life terms. Jim Steinman, the same man responsible for Meat Loaf's most explosive hits. Together, they released Total Eclipse of the Heart in 1983. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon, climbing to number 1 on both the American and British charts and making Tyler the first Welsh artist in history to top the charts in the United States. Steinman and Tyler weren't finished. They followed it with Holding Out for a Hero, another sweeping, theatrical anthem that would later find a second life on the Footloose soundtrack and become a fixture at karaoke bars around the planet. What makes Total Eclipse of the Heart remarkable isn't just that it was a hit in 1983, it's that it refused to become a relic. Decades later, in the streaming era, the song found something rare, a second life, and then a third, and a fourth. Every time a solar eclipse crossed the globe, in 2017 and again in 2024, the song surged back onto streaming charts, introduced to millions of listeners who weren't alive when it first topped the Billboard Hot 100. By early 2026, Total Eclipse of the Heart had officially surpassed 1 billion streams on Spotify alone, making it the most streamed song ever recorded by a Welsh artist. Its music video passed 1.3 billion views on YouTube. On paper, a billion streams sounds like the kind of number that sets someone up for life. And that assumption is exactly where the story of Bonnie Tyler's fortune gets complicated. Here's the part of the story that has quietly frustrated Tyler for years, long before her death brought it back into headlines. She didn't write Total Eclipse of the Heart. Jim Steinman did. In the music business, that single fact matters enormously. Performance royalties, the money an artist earns simply for singing a song, are real, but they are dwarfed by publishing income, the money that flows to whoever actually wrote the song. Streaming platforms pay out fractions of a cent per play, and that fraction gets divided among the record label, the master rights holder, and the songwriter, long before a performer who didn't pen the lyrics ever sees a cut. For an artist like Tyler, that meant the very success driving her renewed fame. Eclipse season after eclipse season, generation after generation discovering the song for the first time, was generating far more wealth for Steinman's estate and her label than it ever did for her. It's a detail Tyler herself acknowledged over the years in interviews, gently pushing back against the assumption that a billion streams equaled $1 billion bank account. And it explains why the headlines about her net worth have swung so wildly since her death. Some outlets, citing the entertainment finance site Celebrity Net Worth, placed her fortune at approximately $40 million as of a January 2026 estimate. Others put the number closer to $30 million. A few split the difference somewhere in between, and at least one outlet floated a figure as high as $57 million. Why such a dramatic range for one person's estate? Because net worth figures for musicians are almost never based on hard financial documents. There's no public will, no court filing, no official estate disclosure to consult. Instead, these numbers are pieced together from touring contracts, real estate records, historical royalty structures, and educated industry guesswork, all of it built on the assumption that private investment portfolios and specific royalty splits will likely never be made public. So if the song wasn't the primary source of her wealth, where did the real money come from? This is the part of the story that has reportedly left even people close to the family emotional, not just because of the number, but because of what it represents. While the world assumed Bonnie Tyler's wealth came from a chart-topping song written by someone else, the real financial engine of her life was something almost nobody was watching: real estate. Her husband, Robert Sullivan, is a British property developer and a former Olympic-level judoka, and over their 50-plus years of marriage, which began in 1973, the couple quietly assembled one of the more substantial property portfolios in the entertainment world. While Bonnie was building a music catalog, Sullivan was building something that didn't depend on chart positions, streaming trends, or whether a new generation happened to rediscover an 80s power ballad. The scale of it is staggering. Reports describe the couple's primary residence, a villa in Faro, Portugal, as worth at least $10 million on its own. Beyond that single property, the couple was said to own more than 20 additional homes across London and Berkshire, farmland stretching across both Portugal and New Zealand, and more than 60 horse stables. The BBC reported that in total, the couple owned 22 homes worldwide, splitting their time primarily between their villa in Portugal and a family home in Mumbles, near Swansea. Think about the scale of that for a moment. Rental income alone for more than 20 properties across some of the most expensive real estate markets in the world would place almost anyone among the top tier of earners, before a single royalty check or touring fee is ever factored in. Layer decades of live performance income, particularly from her devoted fan base across Germany, France, and Scandinavia, on top of physical album sales that reportedly exceeded 100 million copies over her career, and a $40 million estimate suddenly looks entirely plausible, even without a blockbuster streaming payday behind it. It's a quiet, almost invisible kind of wealth building, the opposite of the flashy, single-song jackpot narrative that tends to dominate headlines. And for a family now grieving her loss, discovering the true scope of what she and her husband built together over half a century has reportedly been overwhelming in its own right. A reminder of just how much quiet, deliberate work went into a life that, from the outside, looked like it was defined by one unforgettable song. If Bonnie Tyler was sitting on a fortune worth tens of millions, a fair question follows. Why was she still boarding tour buses across Europe in her 70s, right up until the moment she was hospitalized? The answer, according to people who worked alongside her, wasn't financial desperation. It was something closer to identity. Touring remains one of the last corners of the modern music industry where performers still keep a meaningful share of the revenue, a sharp contrast to the notoriously thin payouts of streaming. But more than that, Tyler simply loved being on stage. She had shows scheduled across the UK and much of Europe right up until her final hospitalization, and by every account, she approached those shows not as obligations but as the thing that made her feel most alive. She wasn't coasting on nostalgia either. In 2013, she represented the United Kingdom at the Eurovision Song Contest in Malmo with a brand new song, Believe in Me, finishing 19th, proof she was still willing to stand in front of an international audience and be judged on new material rather than lean entirely on her greatest hits. In 2023, she was named an MBE in the King's Birthday Honours for her services to music, a formal recognition arriving decades after her commercial peak had supposedly passed. She kept releasing new music well into her 70s, including albums like Free Spirit, Rocks and Honey, Between the Earth and the Stars, and her final studio album, 2021's The Best Is Yet to Come. She released new singles as recently as 2025 and 2026, and just months before her death, she appeared on the soundtrack of a documentary called Homeless, recording an original song titled One World, One Home, aimed at raising awareness around homelessness, a project she described in one of her final social media posts as something she was deeply grateful to be part of. So what is the real number? The honest answer is that nobody outside her immediate family and financial advisors will ever know with complete certainty, and now, with her passing, that number may never be fully confirmed publicly. What can be said with confidence is that the most widely cited estimate places her fortune at roughly $40 million, built not from a single song but from 5 decades of relentless touring, over 100 million records sold across a career full of Grammy nominations and platinum certifications, and a real estate portfolio that quietly grew alongside her husband for more than half a century. What's clear is that the popular narrative, a billion streams translating directly into a billion-dollar payday, simply doesn't match reality. Her wealth wasn't handed to her by algorithm-driven streaming success. It was built the traditional way, night after night on stage, decade after decade, property by property, alongside a partner who understood real estate as well as she understood a melody. For the family she leaves behind, the emotional weight isn't really about the dollar figure at all. It's about everything that number represents. A woman who came from a coal mining family in a house without an indoor toilet, who left school at 16 with no qualifications, and who built, brick by brick and stage by stage, one of the most enduring careers in modern pop music. From a council house in Skewen to a global catalog streamed more than 1 billion times, from a voice reshaped by an unplanned surgery to a legacy now being honored by a prime minister, Bonnie Tyler's story was never really about luck. It was about 5 decades of quietly making the right moves, on stage and off it, until the very end. If you enjoyed this look behind the headlines of Bonnie Tyler's life and legacy, let us know in the comments which artist's untold story you'd like us to cover next.